and observing online and hybrid teaching. Not only that, but supporting best practices. And this session's focus, as Mitzi said, is 5 high impact practices that hopefully are geared to easy adoption in your online and hybrid courses. And that's both for those of you who are observing others, as well as for faculty who are just interested in best practices. Specific examples of these 5 key features will be discussed briefly, leaving plenty of time. Really, our MO today is to leave time for feedback, questions and answers, information sharing. And in fact, I'm putting a link right now in the chat to maybe we can crowdsource this just a little bit today. Really easy way to share a best practices, a best practice or a tip that you have used in your teaching. It would be very beneficial for me and your colleagues. Okay, my controls are not working. Come on. Okay, so Mitzi already introduced us, but here are my lovely colleagues. And I do want to take just a moment and mention that Dr. Lumpkin is not presenting with us, but her considerable contributions were invaluable in preparing for today's session. A lot of work has gone into this session today for what we're presenting today and what we'll be working on beyond today. I also want to give a shout out to Dr. Meyers, Courtney Meyers, our fearless leader and the chair of the Teaching Academy Peer Teaching Evaluation Committee. She has been such a guiding force behind this project. And since we've already been introduced, I'll just jump in here. Our outline today, as I've reiterated, we hope that faculty peers, when they're observing your online or hybrid course, are looking for these 5 high impact practices. In this session, you'll learn first about the importance of completing an honest self-evaluation of your course design and plans for its delivery. Second, how the concept of instructor presence is essential initially and throughout the course in establishing and maintaining a welcoming student-centered environment. Third, we'll share best practices in communication, the inclusion of regular and substantial interaction between the instructor and every student in the course. Fourth, we'll share the importance of building community in an online and hybrid course that provide opportunities for peer interaction among students aimed at enriching their learning experience. Finally, we'll share course organization essentials that ensure a student-centered course design through the lens of modalities that appeal to various learning styles. And we'll share specific examples, but we're counting on you to ask questions and share examples of your own throughout the presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kay.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay, I'm never quite sure. All right, so I am a huge advocate for gathering baseline data and determining where is your starting point, because I figure you have to know where your starting point is before you know where to go. So what I did was I performed a literature review of just faculty self-assessments for faculty preparing to teach online classes. And what I determined is that Penn State University had come up with a faculty self-assessment prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, that following the COVID-19 pandemic, when many instructors who had never considered transitioning to online all of a sudden were forced online, a lot of institutions across the country are strongly advocating for the Penn State faculty self-assessment. It is open source. Anybody is willing to take this assessment. It's actually a really easy self-assessment to take. But more importantly, after completing the assessment, you receive an email from Penn State describing how you did and identifying areas that may require additional focus. This is an extremely detailed email with about 60 to 70 links included that are extremely oriented towards how you did on the assessment. The assessment is fairly easy to take. You rank yourself on 1 to 4 in a series of categories, 4 being the best, 1 being not something I've considered. And based on your score, you receive tailored links towards where you where you might want to see more references, and less links on topics where you feel that you are more covered. Some examples of resources that are included in that link include there's a Google Docs forum for all faculty. There's a series of faculty focus articles with specific tips. One of them was on online grading. There's a series of links related to classroom assessment techniques, different strategies for using online chats, as well as a peer review guide that Penn State developed for assessing online teaching for teachers that need additional assessment. One thing that I noted during this faculty assessment was that there were very limited technology questions. The majority of the questions were oriented towards Canvas, which is Penn State's equivalent of Blackboard, and the Canvas questions are pertinent to our Blackboard system here, in email. So simple interfaces that I believe most faculty at this point have utilized, but very little on technology. The majority of the questions were focused specifically on quality of teaching. And I think Lisa was going to go ahead and add in the link to this Penn State faculty self-assessment just in case anybody is interested. There may also be future interest in creating something similar that's a little bit more specific to TTU. So next slide. One thing that all of the assessment documents that I had read, if you were looking to do a self-reflection evaluation prior to initiating an online course, whether this is your first time teaching online or whether you've taught hundreds of online courses, the emphasis really was on teaching fundamentals. So just to reiterate teaching fundamentals, I've included the Chickering list of 7 good practices for good undergraduate teaching, which are all, I'm sure everybody has seen this list many times and in many different forms, but the take-home message from the literature was really that these don't change. And actually it should be 7. I'm just looking at my bullet point is a little bit off. So the first one's not actually a bullet, but there are the 7 criteria that do not change based on modality. So whether you're online or whether you're in person, this is what needs to be emphasized in your class. More so, this is where the potential pitfalls are. Problems with active learning may be exaggerated online, but lack of active learning is going to be a problem whether you're teaching in person or whether you're using one of the online interfaces. Likewise, giving prompt feedback is going to be a problem no matter what your modality is, although perhaps giving prompt feedback is a little bit more difficult when teaching online. So most of the time when these online classes fail, and when there's a disconnect between students and teachers, or ultimately student learning outcomes are not achieved, it's not because of the transition from teaching in person to teaching online. It's because you're missing one of the major criteria for teaching, for good effective teaching, that would have been true whether you were online or in person. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about online and that rapid shift to online that I'm pretty sure many people experienced in the spring. There were several people that were already prepped to transition online, and for those individuals, it was less sudden than for the rest of us who perhaps had never taught online before. One continuing theme that is coming out in the literature that is just reiterated, whether you're faculty or student, is this sudden transition online to those who weren't prepared to either take or teach an online class led to increasing levels of anxiety. And from the teacher perspective, the faculty tended to focus on technology and modality, which led to increased levels of anxiety, but also as the focus transitioned to different modalities and different online technology techniques, it deviated from teaching fundamentals. Emerging literature from COVID-19 suggests that classroom technology needs to be optimized, and the following considered with students in mind. First of all, whether or not the faculty member is comfortable with the technology. If it is a form of technology that the faculty member is not comfortable with, it's not going to translate well to the students. For the student perspective, the students are concerned with whether or not the technology is specific to the class, And there are certainly instances in which a particular form of technology is very appropriate for 1 to 2 classes, or whether or not it's a technology that is lateral and goes across multiple classes. Ultimately, the technology should be enhancing learning outcomes. And be careful with too much technology, because too much technology, particularly when it is not course specific and highly inconsistent between classes, tends to overwhelm students. What I've put on this slide is the statistic that new modes of teaching were a significant source of stress for 3 out of 4 survey respondents. That was from the faculty perspective, but the same is true of the student bodies. Approximately 75% of students were overwhelmed when new technology was introduced in classes that they had difficulty learning. Do keep in mind that many forms of technology require a second administrator, or else it may interrupt the flow of lecture. Giving some consideration as to whether or not that's available is important before transitioning. Ultimately, whatever technology you choose should be simple and easy to learn, should enhance course material, should provide the instructor with feedback on student progress, and should be incorporated into the course structure that you've designed. Ultimately, what you're trying to avoid are strategies that are either gimmicky or time intensive, or detract from teaching fundamentals, which should be emphasized in all classes. So with that, I'll give it back to Lisa.
All right, thanks, Kay. Yeah, I really appreciated the way she approached this section, because technology is overwhelming for us all, not just for us as faculty, but for students. And thank you, Bob and Courtney, for sharing those perspectives in the chat. Any questions for Kay? Any best practices or anything to share before I let Melanie take us into Instructor Presence? Okay.
Hey, I would just say I really appreciated you looking at the research and talking about the emerging research related to COVID. And I think it's going to be fascinating, to see what sticks, what changes higher ed, K through 12 for that matter, and what we incorporate. So I appreciated you referencing what's starting to emerge from that.
I'm so sorry. I can't see who the speaker is. I can't find it on either the chat or on.
It's Suzanne.
Oh, it's Suzanne. Okay.
Suzanne.
I'm sorry. There's so many people pinned. I couldn't see. Thank you very much.
Okay, Melanie.
All right. So the most important part of any online class is be there. That's it. Seriously, it is very important that there is an instructor presence in all of our online classes. You would be surprised, but almost every complaint that I receive about an online class, and I receive quite a few of them, is about there is no instructor or the class is self-taught. And we know that there is an instructor there, but he or she has not made themselves present. And so it's very important that you show up for your class. None of us would think about not showing up for a face-to-face class, and most of us not for a synchronous online class. So this typically happens in the asynchronous classes. And it's been a number of years ago, but there was one faculty member that didn't show up for 6 weeks. And the students were asking, where is the instructor? Is he or she okay? And that is not a good thing. And so it's important that you be there. And there's a couple of ways to establish that instructor presence. One is through a welcome message, and the other is through an introductory video. So I'm going to talk just briefly about each one of those, and then there will be more information that will be provided by others throughout the rest of this presentation that will make the presence easier. So let's go on to the welcome message. So a welcome message is very simple. It's just an email that is sent out usually about a week before the class begins. It talks about the modality of the class. So where do I have to go to get to the class? What kind of requirements are there? What kind of commitments are there as far as time is concerned? And then also, what are the expectations? So how often should you as a student be expected to log in? About how much time should you put into this class? When are everything going to be due? And you can provide that in the syllabus, and I would suggest putting the syllabus in that welcome message. And then I would suggest following up a day before the class actually starts, so that students are reminded that this is what it is that they're supposed to be doing. This is when the class is actually going to be opening up, and this is exactly what you should do when you get into the class. So the welcome message is very simple, and it's a way to establish the instructor presence way before the class actually starts. It lets the students know that, yes, I am going to be in this class with you. So that's really important. You also need to let the students know who you are. And one of the best ways to do that is to have a welcome video or an introductory video. So the introductory video shouldn't be very long, 3-5 minutes at the max. It should be, especially the very first one, should be very informal. Let them know who you are. Let them see who you are. This last fall, I was preparing my class, and I was out at Ruidoso, New Mexico, in the mountains. And so I just decided I was going to videotape it there, not videotape, record it there, and show the mountains in the background. And as I'm doing that, talking about, you know, who I am and what I enjoy doing, and mountains being one of them, my dogs start barking. And I just left it in there because that's part of who I am. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to do it 15, 20 takes to get it perfect. Just talk to your students just like you would in class, and let them know who you are. Cats appearing in videos, that's great. I love it. So it doesn't have to be long, and it just tells the students who you are. Very informal. You can add, you know, some information about the course or not. I just did it as, this is who I am, and that's it. And then after that, I followed it up with another short video of, this is what you are supposed to do in the course, and this is how you actually get on and do it. So those are two quick and easy ways to establish instructor presence in the class at the very beginning. And don't let it drop after that first day or two. About every other week or so, every 3 weeks, I do another little quick video. And it may be out in my garden, it may be, you know, in my office, it could be any number of places, just to let them know that I'm there and that I am a part of this class. So make for sure that you do that. And then there are other ways to establish instructor presence throughout the class, and some of my other colleagues are going to talk about that. But the most important thing in any class, but especially an online class, is be there. So, turn it back over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Melanie. Well said. Just be there. Reminds me of an old movie of that same title. So be sure and share your examples, questions in the chat. I'm looking at, we've got pet cameos. Of course, you know, no one can forget the doorbell that rang, even though I put a sign on my front door, do not ring the bell. Things happen, and that's okay. I think being human in front of our students is a big way to make them comfortable and establish that connection, especially in an online environment. So keep the questions coming, comments coming, and we are going to hear from Charles on communication.
All right. First of all, I'm really excited to talk with you all today. Because of course the Teaching Academy has all of the answers, right? I know, huh? But it kind of becomes, where we can find things that people are doing well and then really enhance those. We also get to hear a lot of times what's going poorly for people and try to help mitigate that, through different professional development opportunities, and we have a ton of them. But what it really comes down to when it comes to communication is who you are. We just talked about your introduction. Don't be someone that you're not. Be authentic as you can. My background is school counseling, so I deal with a lot of things across communication boundaries. And so one of the theories that we use, if you all want to look into relational cultural theory, it's a theory on top of a theory that it really essentially says we need to pay attention to the people who are trying to engage us, which are our students. They have some sort of reason, reason that way. So another thing I want you to think about here, I don't want you to compare, or we don't want you to compare yourself with other people. That's a hard thing, and it's going to crash on top of your head if you're just starting to do online teaching. You'll see someone's amazing video that has fireworks and like sound outside or something amazing like that. We just want you to compare yourself to you, and are you communicating better? And so that's where I want you to start. I don't want you to think that we're saying you have to have this, you have to have that. Let's go to that next slide. So when you're setting up your program, I don't know if you all agree with me. You can give me a thumbs up or emoticon or whatever. Is it harder to present a program or a class online or face-to-face? When I was teaching in the classroom, I could automatically go from first period to second period to third period and not really have to deal. And so when I prepare online, it's like, oh my Lord, I have to do this, and this. The most important thing though, is what Dr. Hart is talking about. Being there is the first part of that battle. So the next thing is, how do you help build and foster that relationship that's meaningful with your students? So it starts really with the syllabus, and that's where I don't have to say it all the time, but I do say it all the time, that a syllabus is a contract, and it's a contract of how you will be accessible to them. But that's also a personal choice. You don't give tons of information out there and expect for people not to contact you. So if you give your email, respond to them, but do it in a way that's effective for you. I've seen many email signatures that say, I'm not going to respond or please give me 24 hours. On the weekend, give me 48 hours to respond on an email. Just set up your time, whatever is good for you. I have a very young child and a teenager, so I don't sleep at all. And in between there, I have to give time to, pay attention to students. When I say pay attention to students, it means I can only do that in the evening when they're all asleep. So I'm answering emails at 2 in the morning. So there's almost an expectation that I'm going to respond to students at that time. So tell them, this is how I'm going to respond to you. One of the greatest things that happened was when Outlook allowed everyone to do a send, and you can say at what time you want it to be sent. So it'll send it like at 8 in the morning instead of 2 in the morning, or whatever it is that you're doing. Okay, let's go to that next slide. So ongoing communication, this is where you're building relationship. This is what you're doing that is substantial, that interaction that you're having with them. Some of the things that come to mind when we look at this is, how are people going to, yes, Debbie, you're exactly right. It's a lifesaver. Yeah, so that my owl doesn't come land on my shoulder. I'm kidding, I don't have an owl, but I think that'd be pretty cool. With the ongoing communications, there's a lot of different ways to do that. Use your announcements inside of Blackboard. And one thing that I just want to say about the technologies, and we talk about how many we have, don't give your students more technology than they can handle. Granted, we say, yes, these kids grew up in this area. They have to remember 8, 9, 10, and the undergraduate level, different passwords for different things. So we want to keep it simple. One thing that I like to do and that I like to see in courses, and I look for it, is a question and answer forum. Something inside of the course that will allow them to ask questions in an anonymous way, so they don't feel like, oh, I don't want to look like the stupid person asking this question. But you can set your discussions in those forums up in order to make it anonymous for them. So if someone wants to share something with the whole class, they can do that. But that's where you have to be there to make sure they're not putting awful stuff up there. Of course, inviting people to meet with you. My courses, granted, are smaller. I have at max 25. And so I can do one-on-one meetings with each of them. I don't say that for people with the 150 people in a class, heck no. But there's ways of scheduling those meetings that may be of most benefit, where you need to triage it. The most difficult meetings to have online are when you have to teach them the syllabus, you know, so we have to come back and try to find those, you know, the time to actually work. And I'm glad that Lisa put in there to subscribe to your forum, so you know when someone posts. And that's part about that presence. When I found that tool, it was awesome because I could respond a lot more quickly. Automated booking solutions, we have different resources for that. I'll put some in our shared Word document. But there's Calendly is one of the better ones that allows you for students just to sign up for a certain amount of time. So you have to identify what kind of time am I giving to students. Let me see if there was something else on this one that I wanted to put on there. Oh, utilizing your office hours. You know, I mean, of course we have the university requirement, but ask people. Don't just say, oh yeah, just come to me if you need me. You know, start paying attention. What is the data showing on these people? Because you can show when they've logged in, how long they've logged in, and all of those kind of data things really help me to have a discussion with someone. Okay, let's move to the interaction portion. And with interaction, your students, at least what I find with students, especially ones that really need to have organization, is that I should have my announcements at the same time. You know, maybe I do an announcement on Monday or an automatic announcement, but something that's predictable, you know, that students know when you are available and when you're going to give feedback to things. So as we move into this next portion of it, how are you engaging your students? That's where the word comes to substantive, and where you have a deeper connection with students. Granted, many people, many professors don't want to engage with students that way, and I totally am accepting of that. And there's some fields where it's just not condoned. But we build that kind of relationship with people through that teaching, also helping them to learn. Something that's kind of become more difficult is that finding our routine right now isn't really easy to do. And sometimes we can't stay in that routine. So you want to somehow define it for you. And my department chair defined it so well that he said, I will check my email every 4 hours, which I think is kind of a cool thing. You know, you set your own limits. There is no rule telling you that you can or can't do that. And so if you just tell people what that expectation is and what you will be doing, they'll adjust to you because you're the professor. So when we're looking at that convenience of online teaching, because you can wear your PJs if you want to, at least on the bottom, you have this constant kind of feeling of I need to be in my class, I need to be doing this. And so when you find yourself paying more or at least closer attention to the welfare of your students, you've got to definitely check yourself and see if you're putting yourself into a place that is just way too stressful, way too accessible. So text messages, is that something that you would allow? Is that something that you would like? Right now, I'm teaching 2 field-based courses, and if I don't have my cell phone with them, I don't get the call from midnight in the ER from, you know, one of their clients doing something bad. And so really match what kind of feedback you're going to give with what type of accessibility you're going to have. So that moves us, I want you to keep thinking of that idea of substantive interaction. So what I would like for you all to do in the chat, you can type in yes or no, or however you'd like to indicate this. Do you, in your online teaching, do you assign a paper, like a term paper? So you can see how we're going through, there we go. That's what I wanted to see. Imagine trying to give solid feedback to 300 students on a paper. Good Lord Almighty. My goal in life as being a teacher is I don't ever want to test anyone because I hate the response when they come back and fail. What can I do to pass? Well, you could have done better on this test. That might have really helped. So when we look at online courses, when we look at the things that, and I always question why, oh my goodness, Jason, I think we're kin, because that's exactly right. We're sitting there like, I can't believe I did this. So if you do have writing or you don't have writing, make sure that your feedback matches what your expectations are of those students. So 300 students, I would assume there would be multiple choice questions, objective tests. And so when you create your assessments, there's ways of providing feedback. And so really try hard on those. When you're creating quizzes, yes, it is difficult. And there are some publishing companies that provide packets that will just upload. And so I want you to be aware of what those tools are that you have so you can provide feedback to them. I love that, Courtney, that you can record feedback. I do that with something called Explain Everything. That's the app that I use because I'm editing dissertations so often. And as I edit, it will give audio and visual feedback to them. And so on those heavier assignments, that's what I can use. So when we have writing assignments, we need to not just give a grade, we need to give feedback. So you ask yourself, do I allow them to put in a draft first and then do a grade later? That's where you're working with your students to say, it needs to be at this expectation. You don't just say, oh, that's wrong, good luck, go away. You give feedback, you give those points. So when we look at these examples, we do have Professor Langston, I think you're in here with us, and there's your picture. When we look at this, these are some of the examples that you can engage people with. I love that nudge portion of Blackboard Retention Center, something that's just new to me. And it helps me. We do have the Strive program through Tech also, and they'll just give little notes to your students every once in a while. So when we look at our feedback, hopefully you can find examples of methods that are going to reach people that Dr. Locke's going to talk about with her with the different learning styles. So the assessments got to be meaningful. Don't just give a quiz. Make it a meaningful one. Timely feedback. Give a deadline of when you're going to respond to each assignment and hold yourself to it. That's that part about being an effective professor. Also personalized. I loved it. You know, we're talking about videos. I had a mosquito land on my head in one of my videos, and so I just circled it as I was moving forward. But also go as detailed as you think you need to be detailed, and then ask for understanding from the student. That's probably one of the best ways to follow up is say, tell me what you heard me just say. Summarize to me what we just talked about. So I'm going to move off of this one. I've talked way too long, but hopefully we can use at least one or two of those engagement strategies that we talked about earlier, just to provide deeper feedback on our assignments. So I'm throwing the hat.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Amazing. That was so packed full of great tips all the way around. So remember that the examples that we are presenting, they are in the document that I shared. I can't reshare the link. Maybe Suzanne might be able to do that, or someone for those of you who joined us a little bit later. But if you have any other tips you'd like to share, that would be great. Looks like the chat is really going strong here. So with that, I am going to take off my moderator helmet or hat, and I'm going to talk a little bit about community. Community is critical in an online course, and I chose this image very deliberately, and this young man is all alone, and I believe that when you are completing online learning, that frequently you are sitting alone and you feel alone. And in fact, some of the research shows that lagging online completion has been tied to a lack of effective community. And absolutely, we must communicate with our students, as Charles just shared, but it's important for us to try to facilitate community among our students and provide that opportunity for them to connect with their peers. And I am going to provide just a few ways that this might be possible in a way that's not going to be super time intensive for you. One of the options might be to schedule optional meetings with students in small groups for review or questions, or if there are hands-on assignments that are coming up that may be a little bit more intensive. You can schedule those and offer them to students. You can invite or assign students to work in study groups. Specific groups can be created in Blackboard, and I did put a tutorial in the shared document for you to do that. It's very easy to randomly assign groups of students to each other via Blackboard. And then one thing I'd like you to consider is keeping some of your discussions low stakes that really encourage dialogue. I think students get intimidated, especially by when we assess them, which we should, on their written communication, but sometimes I think that interferes with their ability to be real with each other and to truly connect with the course and their peers in a meaningful way. My colleague, Jody Roginson, I don't know if she's on here, I haven't seen her today, I hope she's here to hear me brag on her, has students introduce themselves on a Blackboard discussion forum. And she encourages interaction by having them, having the students identify other students that they have at least two things in common with. And what a great way to, encourage that interaction. Just go in there and find two other students that you have something in common with, whether that's your hometown or the fact that you like chocolate cake or you have a dog. I also have good luck with simply posting a student roster in Blackboard with no personal information, just their first and last names as they would appear on a face-to-face roster that they might sign. And it just lets people know, who else is in the course with me. And that actually came from student feedback. When I talked to them one-on-one, she said, I would really love to know who's in the course with me. And I thought, well, I can certainly solve that problem. And so I did. Here are a few snapshots of some things that I have used in my course. And again, these links I can't share with you now without interrupting the flow of the presentation. But Blackboard groups, as I mentioned, I show you a screenshot here up to the upper left. You can just go to the groups area and you can self-enroll, or you can manual enroll, or you can do all kinds of things in terms of forming groups. Flipgrid is an acceptable platform for use at Texas Tech University. It's free for you, it's free for the students, and it's a wonderful way to let students get to know each other through really short, imperfect video. I also have, and this is just one of those really kind of fluff things, but I created some playlists on Spotify when we went to the pivot. One of the class lists was aimed at how are you getting through the last few weeks, and I called it This Is How We Do It. And I'm a big fan of music in general, and I don't require that students sign up for Spotify, but if they're a Spotify user, they can add songs, or they could have put them in the Q&A and I would add them for the student. But it was just a really fun thing, and the students really gave me feedback that they appreciated that as a part of my course. Also, you can use Microsoft Teams, which we all know Microsoft products are well established on campus, and there are ways to create study groups in Microsoft Teams. Again, all of that information is in the source document that I shared. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robin, and she's going to talk a little bit about a lot about course organization. Robin, we can't hear.
That I did it just exactly the same way again. I muted myself. I apologize. What I was saying was that course organization is something that is critical in the way that your students are going to interact with your course. So it benefits them. And interestingly, it benefits you as well. When we talk about course organization, we're really looking at a variety of different pieces of information. And so one of the things that you need to understand or need to think about as you're preparing your class is how are you going to make this a student-centered design? So often we get a little bit upset or perhaps a little bit too engaged with, I'm going to make this beautiful, I'm going to make this perfect, I'm going to make this work. And we never bother to go back to our students and say, hey, what's working for you? How does the design, how do you understand the design? Does my way of thinking about it actually help you to understand what to do now, where we're headed, and what those ideas or what those actual moments in time that you're going to spend with the course, what are they going to be like? So when you're talking about student-centered design, think about ease of navigability. There you go, got it. And then that all of the materials are fully accessible to students. Videos, documents, tagging, develop those things using access tools that are available to you. What you're going to find is that you may initially feel that push to use accessibility as one of those features or those requirements of your course. But the reality of it is that it doesn't just make it accessible to one group of students who might in fact have a disability, but it helps to make it accessible to lots of other people who can use those tools to further their understanding, to be more engaged with class, and to allow them to think differently about what's going on in class, that if they didn't have the accessibility tools, they might not get it quite as easily. One of the things that we talked about at length in our discussions over these last weeks is the idea of don't move the front door. And I think that's a really key idea when you're talking about course organization. If you plan and utilize a format that is consistent, then students won't be lost. They won't be wondering from week to week, well, now what am I supposed to do? Or how do I find this? Or why is this over here and not here? So I think it's very critical for you to think through what is it that might help them, excuse me, to feel more settled, more organized, and to feel like you're actually providing course materials for them that you've thought through. Again, I like to talk with my students and ask them, hey, how is this working for you? Are you finding everything in the module the way you need it to happen? Or do you need the discussions to be linked here and there? Is it okay to have the syllabus just once in the course, or do you need to see things more than once? And I find that students will, if you ask them, very clearly give you some ideas about where they need the front door to be and how stable they need that front door to stay. So I really do think that's a critical and important issue. Another idea that you can think about is the idea of the using an announcements page for your home page. That way, once again, it keeps everything in one spot and allows those students to know when are you going to try to talk with me via the course, and it provides you with a record of these are the types of interactions that I've had from this particular Blackboard site. So often you think, sure, I talked with them, And then you look at the announcement and you realize, yeah, it's been a week. I really need to provide them with more information about what to do next in class beyond what's just listed on my Blackboard page. So I think that one's a really good one. And then I like to always make sure that I'm communicating with them in several different ways over the course of a week. I provide feedback on their written assignments to me, or their discussions, or if we do some other type of project-based thing, I provide that written feedback individually. And I realize that time constraints may make that more difficult when you have more students, but I think there are ways to interact with them in a way that allows them to feel like you are genuinely interested in their learning. And so now we're ready for modalities. As we talk about learning modalities, a lot of us have talked about that before in terms of the word learning styles. And so you'll see those learning styles listed there for the common ones: auditory, visual, tactile, kinesthetic. And you may be sitting there thinking right now, you've talked at me for 45 minutes and you've told me all these wonderful things. And now you're going to tell me that I need to think about people's individual learning styles and try to move that into my coursework. Well, what we were trying to do here was to provide you some examples of different ways of approaching students in their preferred modality because of two things. One, when you're working in a student's preferred modality, often they can learn the information faster, and they can also learn it deeper, that they have a way of engaging with it and internalizing it, which increases both their interest and their motivation in class, and then hopefully results in outcomes of great progress as they go through class. The other part about it is that all of this doesn't have to be done at once. So for example, if you are at this point in time, or say we're going back a year and it was today you're doing a face-to-face class, tomorrow you're moving to an online class, you need to know that it's not something that has to be done overnight. The best use of learning styles or different learning modalities are when someone finds a natural fit in their course. They don't just cram it in there to make it, I've got something from each one of the modalities, but I always make sure that I think about, well, what's the flow of the course? And could I do this assessment via a project? Or could I use an opportunity for a story map to get the same information that I normally would have asked in a written format that doesn't involve any kind of design? Role playing is one of those things. Obviously, for some classes, it doesn't work, but for many classes, it'll provide you with a look at a student that you might not have been able to see that talent in them. And then once again, I believe that it's critically important to go back to our students and say, what works? What was it that we did that really hit the nail on the head for you? When did you feel like you really learned something in the class? Again, that takes an opportunity, or that makes an opportunity for you to communicate with them, and it may take more time, but the use of that student feedback to then move forward in your course the next time, whether it's online or face-to-face, will, I believe, increase their interest in what's going on, their motivation, and hopefully provide you with students who are really progressing through the course material. Okay, Lisa, I'm ready for you.
Okay. Thank you, Robin. I love how you emphasized feedback and asking them what's working for you. That's really powerful. I actually had a one-on-one with one of my undergrads right before we started, and hearing their perspective is always helpful for my approaches to teaching. Okay, well, I just wanted to remind you what we've just talked about. Honest self-evaluation. Begin with being honest with yourself about where you are in your career trajectory. How much time can you spend taking these tips and incorporating them into your teaching style? But the importance of instructor presence, communication, building community, and then finally course organization. I hope we've presented you with at least one tip or two tips that you can take back and make your teaching more enjoyable and more effective. Thank you so much for your attention. I am going to stop sharing. Any questions, any comments? And thank you to my esteemed colleagues for being on this panel.
So I think it's a great example of how when good teachers collaborate together, what wonderful ideas can be generated and shared. So what a great team of colleagues that you all have on this subcommittee. Really impressive work.
All right.
I think that Brianna Harris has her hand raised.
Thanks.
Great.
Hi, great presentation. Quick question, and you might have a link for this in the doc, and I might not have seen it. I have 300 students, and I would love to be able to pull like individual use data from Blackboard, like to see, has the student logged on, have they been participating? And I can't seem to figure out how to do that. Does anyone have a good tutorial?
That is a fabulous question. I've played around with that, in fact, but have never been able to successfully get that information out. That might be a follow-up. Melanie, do you happen to know?
I was just trying to think. We have several add-ons with Blackboard, but I'm not sure any of those will do that. I know who to ask. Justin Louder, Leslie DeBusk, those are the two that would be the gurus on that. I know that we have some add-ons, and some of them we're supposed to get at that particular aspect, but I can't remember which one right offhand.
Okay, thank you.
Melanie, maybe you could follow up with Justin and Leslie or whoever, and we're going to send out some materials anyway from the conference. We'll add that right in.
That's a great question. Yep. Anyone else?
So it looks like we have another question in the chat from Suzanne.
Suzanne. Okay, first things I plan to. However, my question is about the past. How can you bounce back once you mess up? Okay, so Suzanne's question, how can you bounce back once you mess up? I gave a test recently and the tech issues were so bad that I ended up giving some of them with Respondus lockdown and some of them without. The group without had access to notes, so it was an unfair assessment. I feel horrible, but do not know how to make it up to them. Wow, that is a good question. My philosophy is to be honest and transparent with students. I think they very much appreciate when I admit that things didn't go right, they didn't go correctly, and just own it and not feel bad about it. That's definitely not something that you did deliberately. Throw the test out. I like that. Anybody else have any thoughts to share? Jason is working on teaching and vulnerability. Yes, well, I'm very vulnerable. My students know I'm very transparent. I tell them right up front, I'm transparent about teaching and learning. So they know that they can trust me, I think.
I found that they are pretty responsive when you own up to it. I had a similar situation with an exam that I couldn't grade. There was no way that I could fairly assess this exam. And I owned it, and they got an essay exam instead that I had to twerk the questions, but I got rid of the technology problem because if it was essay and you were required to email me in Microsoft Word, that was software that they all had. It was still the same learning objectives that were assessed. They were obviously assessed in a completely different manner when I switched to a free response exam to an essay exam. But I actually saw it in my feedback, and they were appreciative of the fact that they knew they weren't assessed correctly, and they did appreciate a second chance.
That seems to be the collective response here. Just own up to it. Great question.
Thanks, Suzanne, for being willing to share that transparently. That's all.
She was vulnerable.
I also want to point out there are some great responses in the chat about how to get data from Zoom meetings and some other thoughts about how to look at some of the analytics. So we really appreciate the collective wisdom of this group.
And I'm going to download it and add different resources and ideas to our document.
Can I make just an add-on to all of the great information you've provided? To remember that in your courses, if you use imagery and if you use names, not all our students are named Susie and Bobby anymore, and they're not all white.
Great point of things to be mindful of, Jody.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, everyone.
Lisa, Charles, Kaylee, Robin, and Melanie, thank you for a really informative session. We're very much appreciative of your committee's work and just your willingness to share this great information. We all really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitzi. So as we transition now to our final session of the